G'day and welcome to the second episode of the Coach Analysis series for the 2022 SuperCoach season. If this is your first time on the channel, my name is Eno. I'm from Fantasy Tag TV, and this is a series in which we take a look at what the top coaches in the game are doing in regard to their team as far as the ownership and the trades that they've been making. If you did miss the first episode, we went over the most owned players to start the season after round one, so do be sure to check that one out. After the conclusion of the first three rounds, it is safe to say this has been a different and crazy season compared to the most in recent times. There's numerous breakouts so far that were available at a discount at the start of the season, with the likes of Paddy Cripps, Tom Green, Isaac Heaney and Tim English, who have all set the world on fire so far. As we know, at round 3, this was the start of the price changes, so this did force a lot of coaches into some tough decisions in jumping on or off some certain players. The ownership of George Hewitt and Cripps and others changed dramatically, which you'll see soon. And as it was in my first video, this team is currently the most owned 30 players. So look, the budget does exceed the starting salary or what was, might be possible. But for the purpose of this video, we were trying to analyse the highest owned players all across the board. To take a quick look at where the current Hall of Fame coaches are sitting, so in the top 100 of them, there's 5 in the top 1,000, 21 in the top 5,000, 28 in the top 10,000, and then the rest sort of below that, all the way down to about 48,000. So not a great start for the Hall of Fame, but look, after 3 rounds, as we all know, the rankings can change quite a bit and they're quite volatile still. So still a lot of work to be done and still only very, very early in the season. And just be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at NOFTTV, at the Fantasy Tag TV account as well, and you can find us on Facebook at Fantasy Tag TV as well. So jumping into the team and starting in defence, there was one major change to the lineup this week, and Lockie Whitfield, after being in 93% of teams after round 1, is now only in 36% and actually dropped out of this side just slightly. So look, a majority of coaches got rid of Whitfield after being pretty, less than impressed with his performance against the Tigers in round 2, and coupled that with his round 1 performance as well, a couple of 70s, and he was due to drop a lot of cash. Look, he did return a bit of faith with those that did hold him with a 96 in round 3, but many believe the role still is not as optimal as they would like, and the majority of coaches used him as a chance to get George Hewitt in, who, as you can see, shot up from he was 49% in round 1 to now 87. So that was a major trade made in the back line, and there was Jake Bowie, another that some jumped on, and he just missed out on the side at 30% ownership. So yeah, Lockie Whitfield is a bit of a tough one over the coming weeks. So if you're still an owner, I still think he can turn it around, but I think the coaches that traded him out at this point, might not be too upset with that decision. The rest of the defence pretty much remains the same. There's just a few percent dropping off the likes of Jack Crisp and Jordan Ridley that were, not very impressed with them over the first 2 weeks, and Josh Kipkis, as a result, just slid into the team as another rookie there on the bench. Now moving into the midfield, I'm sure you can guess what the major change here was, and that was, welcoming him in Paddy Cripps. So after round 1, he sat at around 20% ownership, but that is all the way up to 70 now at the conclusion of round 3. He kept up his great start to the season with 119, but, in true Cripps form, that probably could have been a lot higher if it wasn't for some poor disposal and clangers sort of in the second half. And going over the main 2 culprits that sort of made way for him, who still are sitting in this team, but their percentage dropped quite dramatically, and that was Jared Berry from 76% down to 51, and Josh Ward was the other one, who was 93%, and he's down now to 71. So much of the rest of the team remains the same. Lockie Neal and Dacos sitting at 100%. McRae and Touk Miller still the 2 highest owned premium mids, and Dylan Stevens is the one that actually on the bench you can see he rose from I think it was around 50% to around 78% now. A lot of teams boosted him to get him in after he posted a 95 in round 2. So it was very, very disappointing when he put out a 23 last week. So I think for most of us owners that do have him, we just hope he keeps a spot in the team at this stage, because the Swans do have quite a good favourable run coming up. Now onto the ruck line, and this has probably caused the most discussion in the ruck line that it has after the first 3 weeks of the season, in the last 5 years, because since Gaundy was about, there wasn't really much to talk about. They were our go-to captains. It was just, who was our R3 loophole for much of the years. So after this year, with, Gawn sharing some more ruck time and Jackson, leaking into a bit of his scoring, he's dropped off a little bit, and he fell from 63% to now 45% after round 3. So quite a few, Hall of Fame coaches have jumped off. And whilst, still in the top 30 owned players here, if we do combine the ownership of Bruce English, Jared Witts, Marshall, and even Sean Darcy, who's sitting at 3%. The alternate ruck 2 option is actually in front at this point in time. That adds up to over about 50%. So, Tim English is impressed quite a lot, averaging just under 125 to start the year. So if he's sitting at R2, you're probably doing very well. But, other than Tim English, the actual ruck 2 at this point is Riley O'Brien after 3 games. So, scoring in the line as a whole has dropped off a little bit, or quite a bit at this stage. Once, Sean Darcy gets back, it may come up a bit. And look, Grundy hasn't been at the top of his game to start the season. So, look, there's a few coaches going with Jack Hayes at R2, and I think a few of them may be looking at Braden Bruce early, which is a little bit of a risk in itself. Well, more than a little bit, but just to get some more points on field until Tristan Cherry gets that ruck forward status that he should in round 5. That's a bit of a move they can make. And look, let me know what you're doing down the ruck line below. What's your current setup? What's your plans? Just know that I've got Sean Darcy. So if I had any advice, it would just to be make sure you got a big enough bank to get the great man in once he starts banging out big scores. And look, lastly to the forward line, there isn't really too much change here. Just the obvious one of Mitch McGovern, who was looking good after round 1, but, a little bit of a poor score in round 2, and then eventually got injured with a hamstring injury. So he was out for a few weeks. And if you weren't an owner of Cherry or Brody before then, a lot of coaches just made the direct switch there. The rest of the forward line pretty much remains the same. Nick Martin, a few coaches went early on. He rose about 10% in round 2, but yeah, and it should rise, probably another 20% after this round when he's on the bubble. So, he's had 2 pretty good performances and looks to be a very fieldable rookie for us. So to end today's video, I thought I would compare the top coaches' ownership, so the Hall of Fame, but compared to the top current 1,000. So just looking if there's any major differences that might propel the Hall of Fame forward or might push him back further, in the coming weeks. So sort of what the pods are between the 2. And amongst the top coaches, we got Jack McRae, Brodie Grundy, Jared Berry, Tuke Miller, and actually Mitch Hinge as well. They're only around, I'm just going to give an estimate here because it's, a little bit higher or lower, but all of those are about 30% higher owned in the Hall of Fame teams than they are in the top 1,000. So they're guys that can help propel them forward. Jack McRae, him and Tuke Miller, especially with a poor score last week. If they turn around and get back to good form, that will help the Hall of Fame. Grundy, as we spoke about before, if he actually puts out a couple of big scores, that'll help a lot. Jared Berry is still, he's in 50% of size, but only, I think, around 20 in the top 1,000. So he's another guy that could help. And Mitch Hinge, this was surprising to me. He's in, 90% of these teams, but only 65% in the top 1,000. So he's another guy who is in a lot of our fields that, if he keeps scoring well, can help a lot. Now we conversely look at the probably 3 big players that are not in the Hall of Fame teams or are much more highly owned in the top 1,000, around the top of the leaderboard, and that's Tim English. We spoke about him before, averaging 125. If that continues, that's really going to hurt because a lot of us probably don't have a great way of getting him in. And Isaac Heaney is another one. He's in, I think, 37% more top 1,000 teams than the Hall of Fame. So, with that very favourable draw that the Swans have soon, if he continues to pump out some big scores, that will hurt. And Paddy Cripps is actually still one of those. Even though he was in about 70% of the teams in the Hall of Fame, he's in over 90% of the teams in the top 1,000. So that will hurt quite a bit as well. So just where, that's where the Hall of Fame sits compared to the top 1,000. If there's any differences in your team as to the 30 that was on the last screen, let them down below. How many do you have now after round 3? Leave some comments, hit subscribe for me, leave a like, and look, I'll reply to all the comments. And if you have any questions as well, or suggestions as what else you'd like to see in these type of videos, I will be getting someone on for an interview in the next one, so that'll be great to see and what their plans are in the coming weeks. So thanks for watching, guys, and leave a like and comment below, and thanks for watching. So cheers.